Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of MGR Unplugged. We are pretty loaded today again, as always. I feel pretty good, actually. I don't know why I'm a little more optimistic this week as far as everything going on with us, with the economy and everything else. So, no, but we're going to start discussing a little bit of basketball.
Well, you weren't very happy, was it yesterday or 2 days ago when silver went down?
Yeah, silver. I was kind of bummed.
He's been investing in silver, and then
gold is...
I've never seen. I told him, I said, it's so funny. If anybody watches gold and silver markets, the past few weeks have been so volatile, like I've never seen before. I mean, I've been following gold for years now, not as long as other people, but at least for a few years now, and I've never seen the volatility. And as soon as you start saying, I'm gonna invest a little more heavily in silver, it like goes up like 15-20% in like a week. I've never seen silver move like that.
I invested in silver, which was, kind of like the backup of gold, and it went up like right after like 15%. I felt very rich, but then it went down again another 10%.
And then it went down like 5-10% in a day.
Well, that's because
I've never seen silver move like that.
Well, first of all, it's extra volatile these days. But secondly, obviously a lot of people just want to get benefits or reactive profits as soon as they happen.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sell-offs too. But anyways, we're doing the intro now, so we're going to discuss that. That wasn't even part of the topic, by the way. We're going to start with a little bit of NBA because David is a big fan, and also he has a big game today that he'll talk about a little bit.
I said 2 weeks ago on this podcast, I said, don't count the Suns out. The Phoenix Suns have a very slim chance, but we had lots of injuries, and everybody's going to be back healthy, and all the pundits said, no way, why are the Suns even
We're
here?
7-0 now.
7-0.
And the eighth game is today.
The only undefeated team. They could go. They have a game later today. After this podcast, I'm going to be running to go watch the game.
So our clients, if they call you and you say, sorry, I'm busy.
I'm going to say I'm in meetings all afternoon.
I'm meeting with my 50x60-inch plasma TV.
Well, the beautiful thing about working from home is I could just have my laptop and watch the game in the background.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, to be brutally honest, I'm going to be watching the Champions League too. So I'm a big
you were talking about your team. His Phoenix Suns, Atletico Madrid, are playing today too. So
yeah, they're playing the Champions League.
Basically, if you need us, we're not available today. Okay, don't talk to us. Okay.
No,
I'll be back tomorrow.
The Atletico is playing in Portugal. Portugal is like the bubble of soccer now, of Champions League. So now that they got everybody to the quarterfinals and all that, all the teams that made it are going to play in this Portuguese bubble. So it's a different format. It's an elimination format. It's almost like a mini World Cup for teams, not for countries. So it's pretty exciting. And Atletico, who beat Liverpool, by the way, back in March, just at the border of the pandemic, they beat Liverpool both in Madrid and in England. And now they're playing a team from, what is it from? Is it Leipzig? It's Switzerland, I think. I forgot where it's from. But anyways, they play there and in Portugal, and everybody's playing there. There's games all this weekend. So, all right, back to the topic. We're going to discuss a little bit of the NBA, as I said.
1 second. My prediction, if the Suns are able to make it to the playoffs and face the Lakers in the first round, we're not going to beat them, but we'll give them a very hard time.
Okay, well, we're going to discuss that later.
Let
me do the intro.
At least 6-game series is my prediction.
So, there's also news about, not news, but the USPS has been kind of in trouble for a long time, and now it looks like it's even more in trouble. So we're going to discuss that because it's a critical delivery.
It's the backbone of e-commerce, honestly.
Right. It's a critical and backbone of e-commerce for deliveries
of e-commerce logistics,
in the US. So we'll get into that. Also, we're going to discuss Lyft and Uber and DoorDash and all these deliveries as far as or transportation systems for the what is called the gig economy that are once again having trouble or being at odds with the California ruling as far as the separation between independent contractors or employees or their workers. And that's a critical issue as well for these companies to survive. So we're going to get into that. And then what else do we have? Google Travel. This is one thing that want to scratch my eye, and this microphone is in the way. Another thing is Google. I want to discuss quickly or share with everybody an option for those of us who are kind of looking into traveling, not just domestically but also internationally. And it's very hard to find these days, what's happening or what are the rules of engagement when you travel to each country or to pretty much each state, because things are changing very rapidly almost on a daily basis. So Google has an app or has an option to provide more updated information that you'll probably find anywhere else. So we're going to discuss that. So we have a few things going on, and we want to wrap it up also on a timely basis, keep it within maybe 60 minutes. So we'll get started right away. We're going to roll the music and come right back.
None of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down. Hand over my crown. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop.
All right, welcome back. David, let's get started right away with the NBA quickly, sports talk.
I already gave you a little bit.
You did a little preview in the opening, which you went a little long. But so the Suns. Well, actually, let's continue with the bubble. So what is your impression of the preliminary playoffs to the actual playoffs as far as the NBA goes?
For the teams where the games matter, it's been very fun. So like the Suns and the Trailblazers and the Grizzlies and basically teams who are actually fighting for something.
But weren't in theory all teams fighting for something? I mean, what's the reason for going
Not
to...
Not really, because...
I mean if there was a team that had a long shot, that was the Suns, and they were fighting like...
Right, that's what I mean. The Suns were fighting for playoff spots, but like the teams who already are basically secured in the playoffs, they don't have anything to play for. Because keep in mind, especially with the seeding, like teams are playing for seeding, but like the difference between a 4 or 5 seed in a normal season is, okay, who gets home court?
Home court,
But
right.
now there's no home court, so it doesn't matter. So they don't really... The only thing they're playing for is matchups of, like, who do you not want to play? So, like, they were saying Denver, who was the 3 seed, was kind of tanking a little bit because they didn't want to face the Rockets, who were the 6 seed. And basically now they ended up avoiding it. So now Oklahoma City versus the Rockets is going to be the first round matchup. And, like, and I think it's going to be Denver, Utah, and then... Clippers, Dallas, Lakers, whoever is the 8th seed.
So you just mentioned something about the home court. That it reminds me that didn't they? Obviously, I'm not following this very thoroughly, but I remember in the beginning the discussion was like, if you have home court advantage for the playoffs, basically you are one of the top 4. Didn't they say something like the first game, or there was some kind of advantage that you're going to have?
No.
Or they eliminated that kind of question. They were discussing something about...
They discussed, but there's no advantage.
So there's no advantage. So
No
it doesn't matter you have home court or not. It's basically best of 7. You win
Just
4
best of
games,
7.
you move on.
Yeah.
And there's no like a first game is already your win or something like that.
No. There's no advantage, basically.
Okay.
So that's why these teams don't have anything to play for.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not been for the top-seeded teams. Plus, they're resting their players half the time anyways, so it's not been as fun on that end. So the disappointing part is if for those who weren't following, they were gonna just go straight to the playoffs. Basically, they said, okay, we're just gonna end the regular season, go straight to the playoffs. The players insisted, no, we want warm-up games first, so let's restart the regular season with a few games left. They decided on 8, and then basically 2-3 games in, everybody starts resting. It's like, well, why
especially
the
the top seeds like the
Yeah.
Lakers and all that with
It's
LeBron and Anthony Davis and all these guys were just resting.
Right. Not just the Lakers, lots of teams. Basically, everybody who wasn't fighting for the playoffs started resting. It's like, well, why the fuck did we have 8 games then?
Right.
If you're just gonna start resting people. So,
All right, so let's quickly. So today we have the 8th game for
So
the
today
Suns,
is
which
the
is
final
a must
day.
win for them, right? I mean, if they don't win,
yeah. So today is the final day
For everybody.
Today's Thursday for everybody. Basically, the main games that are left, the only ones that matter are the fight for the 8th seed.
so by the time people listen and watch this podcast,
It's
everything
probably
will be
over. You have the Suns and the Grizzlies. Both games are at 1 p.m. Pacific here, our time. So they'll be happening at the same time. The Suns, basically, if they want to get in, they need to win. So they'll need to be 8-0, which they'll be the only 8-0 team in the bubble. And then on top of that, they need either the Grizzlies to lose or the Trailblazers to lose. The Blazers play the Nets. who suck. I mean, unless the Nets could pull a miracle, they've actually looked better than people thought, but I don't think they're gonna win. So I think our best hope is actually the Bucks to beat the Grizzlies, but unfortunately, Giannis decided to headbutt somebody in the face, and he's suspended. And I don't even know how many of the Bucks starters are going to be playing because they have nothing to play for. So, really, the Suns are hoping that there's an upset in either game. But we'll see.
And of course, they need to win. So,
but those are the only games that matter. And then you'll have the play-in game, and then the playoffs start next week.
All right. So, but so far, as we said last week, the bubble format has
it's been good. I think the playoffs, now that the playoffs are starting and obviously the games really count, it'll be much more fun. It was just, there was a lot of primetime games of like Lakers, Nuggets, or whoever, and the Nuggets are resting Jokic in the fourth quarter and stuff, and it's like, okay, well, what do we want?
But aside from the actual games, I think it's been a good also kind of rehearsal for the TV networks, for the commentators, for the whole bubble system,
the production's
press
been pretty
conferences,
good.
Everything else to see how it's working. I think, honestly, the NBA. Before the NBA did this, the only other sport that started with, activities in isolation and bubble type situations was basically UFC with the fights.
UFC.
Elsewhere, in racing stuff, NASCAR started with no spectators. Formula One in Europe and all that stuff started with repeated races. But as far as in one location, indoors, which is the main thing.
The interesting thing to me too is it's worked well, and what they're going to do for next season, because the next season happens quickly. This ends at the end of September, doesn't go all the way to October, but basically at the very end of September, and then December it starts again. Supposedly it's going to be like first week of December. I don't think that's going to be so soon. I think they'll push it back a little more, but supposedly
I thought they said it's going to start by Christmas.
That was the original proposal, and then they said it was going to be like December 1st.
Okay.
But that'll be like basically 2 months off and then right back to a new season.
But new season in their own courts, or they're going to do?
No. In the bubble again.
They're going to do with all the teams?
Yeah, what they said was they might do 2 or 3 bubbles.
Wow.
And they're considering basically doing something like a team plays for a month and then they get like a few weeks off out of the bubble and then they're back in the bubble for a month, stuff like that. So that's the undetermined thing. But the bubbles worked. Basically, the NBA announced yesterday, they said, we've tested 520-something players, whatever. Right. We've had 0 positive cases.
Right. And not only that, they're testing everybody, not just the players.
They've not had a single positive
journalist, team personnel, everybody that goes there is tested many times, which is
thousands of people there, and they don't have any cases.
I don't want to deviate from this because obviously every time we run off topic and stuff, but that's one of the things that really bothers me about this pandemic and these inconsistencies that we find all the time. I was talking to you the other day how, we have situations where, the things are banned or not allowed in certain areas, and then others are totally fine. Like these bubbles with the teams. I mean, you have players with no masks playing, sweating, blah, 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 all that stuff. Yeah, they take precautions and they're tested frequently, and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, they test every single day.
I do know that, and that's part of the reason. But
so much so that Suns center DeAndre Ayton didn't play in the first quarter of the last game because he forgot to get his COVID test.
Right. No,
and he had to go get one, and then he was driving on like a golf cart back to the
But that's
stadium.
my point. If that's all it takes to be tested frequently, okay, fine. Test people, have the test allowed for everybody frequently. But at the same time, you travel, as we will discuss later, and then you get in an airplane and you are in an enclosed thing, in a tube, in a metal tube, flying with 200 other people.
Did you see that?
And airports and all that stuff. And there's no testing. Nobody tests anybody there, and it's perfectly fine.
Well, did you see the study that I think I sent it to you actually? That they there was a study that said
on the airplanes, as far as the probability
with the middle seat empty, they said you have about a 1 in 7,700 chance of getting COVID on a flight, basically. So it was much less than people thought, because planes were like and I thought so too, like the cesspool, right? You're all enclosed in an area. And they said with middle seat empty and the recirculating air and everything, they said you have about 1 in 7,700 chance of getting COVID, which is not that high. So maybe flying is safer than we thought.
I mean, you've flown.
I actually think, and you said, I agree with you, because we were talking about it. To me, because we did fly. I've taken one flight during this, and to me, the place where I was most like kind of like not freaked out, but like a little like, oh God, I hope nobody has COVID here, was security.
Yeah.
Because security was, everybody's touching everything, and there was no social distancing. They had the things on the floor. Nobody followed them. It was all bunched up, exactly like normal security is pre-COVID. So that was the only place where I was
trays, putting things everywhere, common things, all that stuff. And at least in one flight, you are with a group of people, but in security, you are finding people that come from all places and go to all places. So it's like a freaking just funnel.
So that was the only time where I was like, this should be better.
But that's the thing.
But all they have to do is they just need to be stricter with saying, hey, social distance here.
And,
hey,
but like,
here's wipes for when you, like, what they should do is just, before you go into the thing, you must take hand sanitizer and wash your hands before you touch all that shit.
We're not in a
Basic
society
stuff.
that is ready for this. They're making patchwork just to comply.
That's so basic.
Well, I know.
Have a fucking hand sanitizer machine?
I know.
How hard is that?
What I was thinking, in fact, I was thinking this morning as I was getting coffee for us, that I'm now at a point where I think that the solutions or the measurements that different companies and sanctioning bodies or organizations or whatever are taking to the pandemic are directly related to the chances of them being sued by somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think litigation, which is the favorite sport in this country, is unknown. There's no league, but there's a lot of litigation going on all the time. Litigation is the direct factor that determines how much you put in place or basically not at all as far as the coronavirus pandemic goes. Like, they just started canceling all the college sports seasons, in different conferences and things like that. You know that much better than I do. And some conferences are saying, yeah, we're going to move forward. Some others are saying, no, we're going to cancel everything. And football season is supposedly going on. Basketball has been going on with no problems. We are all traveling in a tube, go to a restaurant, social distance, whatever. The restaurant.
Well, the problem for the college football thing was, a lot of the money they make is from ticket sales. They're not going to be able to have any ticket sales. So for non-big schools, like the big schools have TV money, but the non-big schools don't get that TV money. So they make all their money from tickets.
What happened to just having a league and sports for the sports sake?
Yeah, well, that's not
okay. Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying.
It's a money-driven thing.
What the school doesn't want is to have college athletes, student athletes playing a game, and then one student athlete all of a sudden tests positive, and then they decide to sue the school, say, "Oh, you put me there, you put me to play."
And the key difference is these are not professional athletes.
Exactly.
They're not being paid.
Right.
They are amateur athletes.
Exactly.
So
and
it's a different thing.
Like that, you can multiply it to many other places.
And
all restaurants,
people focus on football, but really the NCAA is all sports. And so people focus on like football and basketball because those are the money makers.
Right.
But swimming and lacrosse and all these things
and golf
nobody
and
watches.
Things and other sports. I mean, why that?
Right.
Right.
Those are all basically funded by football and basketball.
So we have already golf. Obviously, there's major tournaments taking place, including last weekend, and it was fine. And then all of a sudden, college sports, they do not have golf. What's the difference? One is professional, the other is not. Like I said.
Well, yeah, but one, the people know the risk and they're paid to be there. The other, they're not paid anything.
They know the risk too, or they're not paid anything. But you look at you talk to the student athletes, most of them would probably want to play, but the colleges say, we don't want that risk. Why? Because if we get sued or something, the damage is worse than them playing. So there's a lot of fear factor there from litigation right now, as far as, and that's one of the things that, even when it came to discussing employees going back to work, that's one of the things that the President Trump was talking about during the stimulus packages and all that stuff. One of the conditions was like the no suing clause, which says, okay, employees cannot sue their employers for asking them to go back to work.
I think everybody's going to have to sign in the future
a
virus waiver.
That
says if I get sick on the job, I acknowledge the risk I'm taking.
Right, exactly. Saying, okay, I'm going back to work.
But then there's also the argument of, we have hazard pay for a reason. Mm-hmm. Should people now get hazard pay for working with COVID? Right. Hey, if I'm going to take more risk, I want more reward.
But that's, again, and that's what happens. That's when you start seeing all these inconsistencies that you start wondering what the effect is. Like you just said, the chances of getting the virus on a plane. and you say, okay, it's very minute. You have one seat in between, and the other guy here. The
It's
air is
minute if you're a passenger
Right.
once in a while. If you're a flight attendant, yeah, 1 in 7,700 isn't a lot. But guess what? If you're flying twice a
Well,
day,
yeah,
every
but that's the
single
same thing
day,
of the chances of dying on a plane,
No, but
crash or
it's
something. I mean,
different.
if you're flying 20 times a day, obviously you have more chances than
no,
the
but I
person
mean,
that-
even like security or whatever.
Well,
I
I
mean,
understand that, but what I was going to say is that
if you're a waiter and you're like if you're an office worker like okay, think about us, right? We're fortunate that we can work from home, and I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this can work from home, right? So really, unless I seek it out, I don't really have to come in contact with anybody these days, other than
No.
when I go to the grocery store
I
or
know,
something.
but
If you're a waiter or something, you're going to come in contact with hundreds of people a day. So your odds of getting it are significantly higher.
yeah, but how much contact does a waiter have with people? I mean, I've been to many restaurants,
Yeah, but-
and you see them. Can I take your order? Okay, they're up there. You're sitting, and they have their masks, and they have all the stuff. And sometimes they don't even touch anything. They give you these scannable menus where you basically
But
just
it's an odds thing. That's what
Yes,
I'm saying.
I know, obviously.
Maybe a waiter has a 1 in 5,000 chance of getting it from a customer. But guess what? In a month or 2 months, they probably are going to come in contact with 5,000 people.
Well, I understand that, but okay,
So
that
that's my
waiter
point.
is 8 hours a day, maybe working in a certain location, whereas me, the customer, instead of paying 8 hours a day, I'm going 8 hours a day working. I mean, I'm going to a supermarket or going to a Home Depot or going to another hardware store or going to a car store, this and that. So I'm actually doing the same thing in different places that I have less control over. So
Yeah, but but it's not the same.
well, I mean, it's
No,
just
you
either-
have fewer points of contact. You at most in a day, if you're running errands, come in contact with like 3 or 4 people.
What about
A waiter comes in contact with hundreds a day.
Oh, I wouldn't say hundreds. But
Well, it depends on how busy the restaurant
Yeah,
is, but
on-
like I said, it's just math. If you have a 1 in 5,000 chance of getting it from somebody in a restaurant, and I'm totally making this number up, I have no idea what the number is, but if it's 1 in 5,000, okay. But if you're a waiter at a busy restaurant, you're gonna come in with 5,000 people in a month. So odds are you are gonna get it, right? So that's the thing.
Well,
People
first of
who
all-
have high contact jobs.
First of all, restaurants are not busy. They allow them
No, but
to
if they
open
become
outdoors.
busy again.
Well, if they become busy, yeah, they become busy. But right now, they are very limited seating, very spaced out seating, and they're not busy at all. I've been to a number of restaurants lately, and I mean, it's like going to a restaurant on, I don't know, the day after Thanksgiving or something, or whatever day nobody goes to a restaurant.
No, I get it. I get
it's
it. But
like
I'm
fucking
saying
empty.
I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about
Well,
if we're trying to go back to normal, they are going to be exposed.
no, I
right?
wouldn't say normal, but you have conditions and certain rules in place as far as social distancing, wearing masks, whatever they decide, which is a whole different story basically. But my point is that there are so many inconsistencies as far as the rules. Like, you can go to a supermarket and be full of people and touch everything and put it in your bag and scan it or not scan it or whatever and come in contact with a lot of people in theory, and that's fine that those are essential workers or whatever. But then you can't go to the beach. I don't get it. I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just a dumb idiot.
No, I'm not.
But I don't
saying-
know why
I'm not-
California.
You're not wrong about that. I'm just
I
saying.
just wonder. I don't know why California bans people from going to the beach or laying down in the sun, which is the primary source of vitamin D, which is the primary source
is that
for
still
your.
going on though? I don't.
They had it, and they go on and off. And there's some beaches that are closed, limited space, this and that. They don't allow you to. They allow you to go to a beach and for a walk or something, but they don't want you to be laying down. It's like, what the fuck? I'm laying down on the beach, just taking sun, vitamin D. That's the number one thing to boost my immune system, okay? It's proven. And you know that very well. Even vitamin D also from the sun is much more effective than vitamin D supplements, okay? So all those things to me make no sense when then they say, oh, you cannot do that, but yeah, you can go to the store, to a grocery store, wear your mask, touch everything, be in contact with other people.
All right, let's move on. We said we wouldn't talk about coronavirus.
I know,
today. I don't
I
wanna
know.
talk
That's
about
so
it
much.
more.
It just kills me because I'm very analytical and I understand logic, and I go by logic all the
Yeah,
time.
but I don't think nobody has the answer.
No,
There's
because
no
it's
right
become,
answer.
like I said, it's become
How do you
a
balance
Well,
safety with basically the economy? How do you balance that?
Well, exactly. There's no way. I mean, what we
There's
know
no
with the
right answer. There's just
what we know with the economy, and that's something that pretty much all countries agree on right now, especially all civilized countries, is that you cannot shut down the economy again or anymore. I mean, that will just make the repercussions of that are worse than shutting down the economy. I mean, you're going to have a lot of issues if you shut down the economy when people have no work, no money. They are in their houses. They have drug addiction. They have suicides. They have divorces, whatever. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And what happens when people are just not going on with their normal lives? And they say, you know what? I'll wear a mask. I'll wear a freaking hazard suit. Just let me go to work. Let me do my normal life. And that's just basically what happens. So, but especially when people are so inconsistent and governments on litigations on stuff, and they say, yeah, you can fly with certain situations, but not the other. You know, I mean, it's just the logic. It's just it doesn't make any sense. You know, somebody out there wants.
I'm not disagreeing. That's what everybody's saying.
Right.
But let's move on.
All right, let's move on. So
we said before the podcast we wouldn't talk about coronavirus.
I didn't even include this topic in the preview. You started it. Anyways.
No, you started it.
Okay, well,
you started asking me about basketball and COVID and bubbles.
All right, so let's move on. US Postal Service, our dear friends over there. So they've been in trouble for a while, and I'm not a big fan of the Postal Service as far as deliveries and shipping and things like that. I understand they're critical. I understand they go to places where they paid, or the more private companies like the USPS, UPS or FedEx or any other express services, you know, are much more reliable, but also much more expensive. So I understand the need for the USPS, but at the same time, I'm not a fan as far as they're today keeping up with the trend, basically. Back in the days, it's like, oh, the Postal Service always delivers in the snow, in the ice, whatever, they send you the letter. Now nobody gives a shit about mailing normal letters. It's all about packages. So why do you think the USPS is so critical for the e-commerce economy?
It's not a question of why do I think. It just is. I mean, it's just
right.
The majority of e-commerce companies use USPS because it is the cheapest option for most cases. And if it's there's two things. I mean, yeah, okay, you can have a debate about whether the USPS should exist, and if it does, should it just be its own private company, blah blah blah. We can talk about that, but that's a different topic, really. The question is, what's going to happen if the USPS really doesn't get the funding it needs to stay alive in the next basically few months? What's going to happen to e-commerce?
Okay.
Because I mean, even Amazon itself still uses USPS. And I mean, right now, I looked up the numbers yesterday. More than 30% of the USPS revenue now comes from e-commerce, not letters, not e-commerce. Is
sure.
Over 30%.
Yeah, I mean,
of the
mailing
revenue
is done. I mean, nobody mails anything.
And so what's going to happen, you know, especially because UPS just announced last week that they're raising the rates again for this holiday season. And so the hardest part about e-commerce, and obviously things are very different now because of COVID, but really the biggest struggle for e-commerce has pretty much always been the logistics. Because at the end of the day, when you go to a retail store, you can get something today and you can get it for free shipping.
And the fact that we are now used to getting something.
Right. Well, we'll get into Amazon in a second, but I'm talking just e-commerce retail. The biggest advantage is that with retail, you go there, you get it today, you don't pay extra for shipping, none of that, right? It's covered basically. The cost of the shipping is covered because they still have to ship it to the store, but they don't charge you for that, right? Or at least not directly. But with e-commerce, you obviously have to pay shipping. The company eats the cost and offers free shipping, or the customer pays for the shipping. But depending on what you're shipping, it can be very expensive. And there's a limiting factor. There's a lot of e-commerce businesses that I think could do very well in the fact that there's a demand for them on the consumer side, but that the logistics of it would be so expensive that it's just not possible. Like one example is one of our clients that we're working with sells like frozen items. That's just incredibly expensive to ship. You know, it's very hard to have an e-commerce business where the goods need to be frozen. So that's an example, right? You go to a grocery store and they have a whole huge frozen goods section and lots of it's very cheap. But to ship, but that's because they ship it on trucks that are made for that.
Refrigerator
But if
trucks.
you're shipping individual items that need to be frozen, it's very expensive. So that's one example. But even anything that takes up a lot of volume, anything that's very heavy,
Okay, so-
it's expensive. And so the biggest challenge for e-com is overcoming the logistics costs.
I understand.
So if the USPS goes out of business, those logistics costs go up even more.
Sure. Let me ask you a few questions on the business side. You say if the USPS goes out of business, okay, why will they go out of business compared to UPS or FedEx? If they are used so much, if they are the backbone of e-commerce, which means that they
because
have a lot of business.
They don't charge as much as the other ones. That's why everybody uses
Okay,
them.
so they don't charge as much as the other ones,
And
but they are used much more than the
Especially-
other ones. I mean, what if you were?
especially for the nice thing about USPS and what's always been one of their strong points is that UPS and FedEx, if you're shipping to a city, are pretty competitive with USPS. But if you're shipping anywhere outside of a major metropolitan area, it's extremely expensive, and so the USPS is much more affordable.
Okay, so I'm the CEO. Let's say that I'm the CEO of USPS. Okay, I don't know if they have CEOs or how the titles go, but let's say that I'm the person in charge of the USPS, and I say we're losing money. It's like e-commerce people. Sometimes they say, okay, I have some products where I'm going to lose money, but they're going to anchor me and let me sell their products. So I'm the USPS president or CEO, and I say, okay, when we send something to, little town anywhere, Kansas State or whatever, where nobody else can reach it because it's like 2 miles off that road or something, and I'm only charging $2.90 for a box or whatever, I'm losing money there.
Right.
But I still need to deliver it because it's the same as if I'm going somewhere to Fifth Avenue, Manhattan, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, but at the same time, number one solution is like, okay, if I go to those rural areas that are out of scope, I can have a little surcharge, and I think
Well, that's
everybody.
the problem, though. But that's the problem.
Why?
because-
I mean, if the only
Well,
other
because-
option is that you can ship FedEx or UPS, and if I charge $2.90, FedEx is $15 and UPS is $15, and instead of $2.90, I charge $6. I'm gonna lose less money. I'm
but
not gonna make as much.
But the whole premise of the USPS. So this is where
Well,
it gets tricky.
but
though.
let me finish one second. But hold on a second.
No, I
Let
know
me-
what you're saying.
No, but that's one thing. That's my first point. If I'm against the wall where I'm gonna disappear, I'll go bankrupt. Then you need to make
but my
drastic
point
solutions.
Is, hold on. Well, let me. The tricky thing about the USPS is that it's in the Constitution that it must exist. So the whole the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin is the founder of the USPS.
all that stuff.
Okay, well, hold on. And so the USPS is in the Constitution, right? Because they said it is vital to have a postal system in the United States, and we cannot charge extreme amounts, depending on where you live, because that would be basically unfair. In the same way, by the way, we do the same thing with internet, right? So like if AT&T, if you live out in the middle of nowhere, we have I forget exactly what it's called, but it's basically fair internet, and
Yeah.
everybody pays a little bit of money.
Yeah,
so
you
that
pay
if
that on
you
your
live
bills.
out in
Same
the
thing with
middle of
telephones, which
nowhere-
existed all the time.
Right.
Right.
And so it's the same thing with the USPS. And the tricky thing is it's backed by the government. So if the USPS was just a private business, then they wouldn't deliver to those places in the same way that UPS says we don't deliver to those places. And if you really want us to deliver, we'll do it, but it's going to cost you $40 to ship to some rural place, right? The USPS loses money on those things, not because of a business decision, but because they are backed by the U.S. government, by taxpayers.
Okay.
And the agreement with the taxpayers is we're going to give you money, but you're going to do these things that lose you money, right?
Okay.
So we're going to make up for the money you lose. That's basically the
understood.
agreement.
So-
the USPS is going to be a business that loses money because they want equity between deliveries for everybody
So
in the
if
United
the
States,
premise is-
and the taxpayer will make up for those losses.
Okay.
That's the premise.
If the premise is that the USPS must exist constitutionally because they must have equal rights for the person that lives in the middle of nowhere versus the person that lives in downtown anytime
Right.
USA, and the government is supposed to subsidize the difference between the actual money made versus the money lost for that situation. What's the problem with the government subsidizing that? Why are they
Well,
going to lose funding?
Well, because
I mean, the
Trump
funding needs to
doesn't
be
want to fund it, basically.
well, but it's
Trump
being,
wants to pull the funding.
this is not Trump. This has happened back with
No,
Obama.
it's happened many
I mean,
times.
the
but in
problem
this
happens all the
specific- in
time.
thi- I'm saying it's happened many times, but in this specific case,
I mean, I've been listening to the USPS.
yeah, it's always a thing of basically. It's like everything. It's
But
like,
it's the problem with the USPS too is this is being run super inefficiently as a government agency, pseudo or government agency that doesn't give a shit about profit and losses and all that stuff. They say,
well,
no,
actually,
it
that's
is,
not true.
Well, it's not. Lately, it's been better,
It's
but
much
back-
better in the last few
It's,
years.
of course, it's getting better because they don't have a choice. But at the same time, you can run things. I mean, when you have logistics and when FedEx existed in the beginning and UPS and all that, they had a certain method to deliver. And you remember back in the days of FedEx, it was very logistically tracked, but it was very inefficient because every package. I remember specifically, I was in Washington D.C. and I was sending a FedEx package from Washington D.C. office to another office in Virginia, which is across the river. Okay, and that package will go from Washington to Memphis and from Memphis back to Virginia. For whatever reason, they had to ship it back to their central logistics section and then ship it back. I don't know how much it cost to put something on a plane and ship it to Memphis, track it, blah, 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 and then put another plane and send it back to Virginia so the day after it's there. But it was totally, I'm like, I don't know how the fuck to do these things. And then they started learning that, okay, we can just ship it this thing. They improved their system because they have profit and losses.
Yeah, but the USPS
and they are public companies.
in the last 5-6 years, now that packages as their main business have gotten much better.
Of course.
Much
Why?
better.
Because they have competitors.
Yeah, of course.
Because before
No,
it
I
was
mean,
like we'll get there when we
USPS
get there, and
USPS is in a competition like everybody else. But the difference is that basically the whole thing of the USPS, the reason why the USPS loses money compared to UPS and FedEx is because the USPS has to, by law, do things that UPS and FedEx as private companies don't have to
understood. But if you
do. So the reason they lose money is because they do money losing things by law. If the USPS basically went totally private, like some people are suggesting, like Trump basically says, we're not going
Privatize
to
it.
fund you, we're just going to make you totally private. Well, guess what? USPS is going to stop doing the things that lose money. And then all the people who don't live in a city are basically fucked. I mean, it's that simple.
well. No, in a way, but I mean, if it's all the market is the market. I mean,
But the point is, we specifically have the USPS because we want to counteract market forces. That basically you shouldn't have to live in a city just to get the same.
No, I totally agree.
packages
I
and
totally
everything.
agree with that. But if you audit the USPS and you say, okay, how much money you're losing or not making because you're obligated to ship this package.
Well, this thing.
Hold on, let me finish, please. So, how much money you're losing or not making because you're obligated to ship this package to this rural area where nobody else wants to go for a decent price, versus how much money you're losing or not making because everything else that you do is so inefficient.
But that's the thing. Parts of the USPS are actually very profitable, so they don't lose money across the board on
Okay.
everything. They make money in a lot of areas, but they lose a lot of money when they have to ship a package to some dude randomly in rural Kentucky. That costs a lot of money, and they lose money on that. And UPS and basically
If
they
that's
charge.
if that's the case,
they
then
charge,
the government
they
should.
charge $8 for something that UPS or FedEx would charge $50, basically. But they do it because they have to. So that's where they lose most of their money. Shipping to cities and all that, they make money, right? They make money. They're a business. They make money on all those things. They make money on letters. They lose money on letters that have to go, again, to the middle of nowhere. But they make money on a lot of parts of their business. But
No,
they
I agree.
lose money
I-
on the parts that we agree as a society that we should subsidize.
No, I understand.
basically.
So your opinion is that whether it's Trump, Obama, or going back to Bush's, whatever, I mean, the USPS has been in the news for this particular topic
I think
over the last
you
15,
cannot
20
just get rid of the USPS.
Right, I agree. So
Because if you do that, I mean, the USPS truly is one of the major infrastructure that we have in the United States.
Okay.
So to just get rid of it is
Okay.
crazy.
So-
now, if you want to come with private solutions, fine. But that needs to be done over a decade, not just all of a sudden you're
well,
done.
but it's been over a decade with this issue. So what is your solution? Is basically that any government, whether it's, I mean, I don't want to say Trump or whatever, or whoever comes next says, okay, we're going to subsidize you no matter what.
Yeah.
So if you have at the end of the year, you have a deficit of whatever number of millions
Not
or
no matter
trillions.
what. Obviously not.
Well, obviously,
But the USPS gets a bad rap, because the USPS is profitable in the sections that make sense, in the same way UPS is profitable in the sections that make sense. But UPS loses money on certain things too, right?
Exactly.
Every business does.
That's the thing.
But the difference is that the main reason the USPS loses money compared to FedEx or UPS is because they are by law required to do things that private companies are not required to do. That's the whole reason they lose money. If USPS went private tomorrow, they would be profitable.
But they also
because they would stop doing those things that lose money.
But if the government says, hey, you need to ship this package to this area that is in the middle of nowhere, I mean, if I want to get a phone line, and I'm living like off the grid, but I said I want to have a phone line, and I need to have whatever phone company put a line through the mountain to my little cabana or whatever, I live in the middle of nowhere, or cabin or something, it's going to cost me a lot of money.
But it doesn't. That's the
Well,
thing.
I know, but
It
that's the
doesn't
thing.
because it's subsidized.
Why? There's a difference between saying, hey, we have major metro areas where we are still the cheapest option and you can ship with us, very reliable and everything. And then we have off metro areas or rural areas where we're going to have a little surcharge. And guess what? If I live in the
But
middle
it's
of
not
nowhere,
a little surcharge. You say like adding $2 to the cost is dude. I'm telling you, they do things that UPS would charge you $50 for, and they do it for $8. Okay. So
well,
a $40 surcharge,
instead of
people
8,
can't afford that.
If instead of 8, you do it for 15, you're still much cheaper than any other option, and you kind of decrease your losses. I mean, something needs to be done to solve the issue.
No, I mean the answer is just being subsidized for those things. That's what we do.
Well, yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, we're printing trillions of dollars to subsidize a lot of issues right now.
The point is,
I don't see the problem in
I'm
subsidizing.
a very private market person, and I think that private companies should do a lot of things. But in the case of the USPS, it's a rare case where the amount that it costs relative to the good that it brings, I think, is not even close. The USPS doesn't lose that much money, right? They don't lose that much money. It basically costs taxpayers a few billion a year, which in a $4 trillion annual budget for all that the USPS does, I think is not that much.
I agree.
And I think
I don't want the USPS to disappear. I mean, it has to be some kind of.
Like I said, if it's going to disappear, you can't just get rid of it. You need to have a major plan in place to replace it. Because if you just say all of a sudden overnight, come October, November, if the USPS doesn't get the funding it needs, all right, bye-bye, no more USPS.
Well,
What replaces it?
I don't think that's going to happen. But I mean,
They
there's
don't get funding.
tons of employees and people.
Yeah,
that
that's
are
the other thing. They have over 300,000
Right,
employees.
right.
Okay,
So-
but that's my point. Like, it's not as simple as just saying, "Oh, we're gonna cut the funding to that." Like, okay, that's nice to say, but the USPS, like I said, is one of the vital piece of
Do you know?
federal infrastructure that
I understand.
we
Do
have.
you know how other postal services in other countries work? I mean, if you go to European countries, I mean, they all have.
Yeah, it depends on the country, but most of them
Do they have the
subsidize
same
theirs
issues?
too. Yeah, but they're socialists, so they don't care. But
No. You cannot just say they're socialist. I mean, there's tons of countries that are not socialist and they work.
no, but
I mean, there's lots of countries. I mean,
I don't know a specific
social
country.
democracy is not socialist. I mean, it's just.
My point is, different countries have different things, but yes, most of them have some type of government-backed mail system,
Well, like we
just
do.
like we do here.
It's just a matter of that. Or
The difference is that a lot of countries are much smaller than the United States. So the U.S., France's postal service does, I don't know, but they don't have as much cost as the U.S. does because the U.S. is way fucking bigger than France, basically. The point is the U.S. is a huge country, and on top of that, we have territories and shit, and we have to ship everywhere.
Yeah,
So
but
to do that affordably costs a lot of money. I don't know.
All right. So what's the
point
what's the
is-
situation right now? I mean, what's the
The
deadline?
situation right now is that the USPS is losing money.
No, they've been losing money forever. But
And they're
what's
not
the,
getting funding. And it seems like Trump really does
who
not
approves the funding or denies the funding? Is
the
it
Senate.
Congress?
Yeah. Mitch McConnell and Trump don't want to do it, basically.
Okay. And they're negotiating on the amount of funding, or they say zero?
Trump
mean,
sounds like he just wants to cut it completely. Like he says, I don't want to give him funding.
Yeah, he says a lot of shit, but he's not gonna get it done. I mean, it's just not gonna happen. I mean, people need the USPS.
But USPS made adjustments, and but the other thing too is, especially right now in COVID, one of the things is the USPS has so much overwhelming demand that they just couldn't even keep up with all the shipments, because all of a sudden overnight they had triple the amount of
that's one
shipments
thing
they
that I
needed to make.
discovered, that I was talking to you before the podcast, that during the last 2-3 months I've ordered a bunch of things, obviously like everybody else, and amazingly the things that came from USPS were the most unreliable ones that never arrived when they were supposed to arrive, versus all my packages from UPS or FedEx arrived. I can track them, it's out there for delivery, it's here, it's there, it's coming tomorrow, and it comes tomorrow. Whereas USPS, it says is at this service station in California, awaiting next route, awaiting this, supposed to arrive on Monday, never arrives on Monday, calling the shipper, calling
Yeah,
this.
I know. Everybody has
Very
shipping
unreliable.
issues, but my point is,
tracking number means
they
dick.
all of a sudden overnight had triple
Well,
the
obviously
amount
the
of
logistics,
packages to deliver.
yes.
And it's not like you can just triple the USPS workforce overnight.
Well, how did FedEx and UPS handle it? Because
They
were-
had trouble too. Maybe you didn't experience it, but
Yeah,
they
but
had
those
trouble
guys,
too.
when they had
and
trouble-
guess what they did? They raised prices.
Yes, okay, and they also hire
your
extra
UPS
things, and and in holiday seasons they hire U-Haul trucks to compensate, and temporary workers, and you hear that all the time because they hire people as is needed.
You think USPS doesn't hire temporary workers?
I don't know. Obviously, they
course they
don't handle the delivery. I'm sure they hire temporary workers, but in a COVID situation where people cannot go shopping to the stores and they're shopping online, which we
Yeah,
discussed.
but we're in an extreme situation. Keep in mind. Okay, so to all of a sudden,
I'm
say,
okay with
for a company
subsidizing.
with 300,000 employees to now need to triple their workforce. That's 600,000 people.
I understand, but to me, I mean, my point is that if I'm the auditor of USPS and I
You
say,
think they're not audited?
no, I know,
course
but
they
if I'm the person, I say, okay, show me your balance sheet and tell me how much you're losing, which is what the government is subsidizing, because you as a kind of pseudo government entity.
You can look it up. Their numbers are public.
Right.
It's not a
No,
secret.
I understand. So
they make money.
So if they're only losing money, my point is there. If they're only losing money because they are delivering and filling a void and nobody else is willing to fill, then fine. That's the balance. This
Right.
money I'm losing because I'm dropping this
Trust
package
me,
for
when
$3 when it should be
USPS
$30. Fine. But if they are losing on other inefficiencies, that's what they need to fix too.
when you ship to a city, right? If you're shipping from LA to San Francisco or whatever, they make money, right? USPS makes money on the things in the same way that UPS makes money. But keep in mind, first of all, the logistics business is a very cutthroat, thin margin business.
Well, like every business.
So even UPS and FedEx, it's not like they're making huge margins. These guys have like 10, 15%
Well, I understand.
gross
It's very
margins.
competitive. Unless
So USPS has the same margins or maybe a little lower margins, but the difference is they have huge losses in these other areas that they don't have a choice but to do. And like I said, the other tricky thing is it's literally in the Constitution. And you might say, oh, it's outdated, whatever. Fine, maybe it is.
I mean,
but you have to make a constitutional amendment to change that.
I understand.
That's not an easy thing to do.
But it's sometimes when I hear something that starts with the founding fathers, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But those founding fathers could not predict that USPS was going to have UPS and FedEx and competitive and COVID. And I mean, we need to also understand that times
but
change.
you also need to understand that to make a
the
constitutional amendment,
genius with light
to make a
bulbs to see.
constitutional amendment,
What? I understand.
it's not an easy thing.
No,
it
I
doesn't
know.
just happen.
That's why there's so few,
Right.
But at some point
So-
you need to adjust to the times.
Oh,
All right.
Okay.
That's good. Let's move on. Totally different topic and almost a little different. But another thing that happened earlier this week is that in California, the fight that has been happening between Uber, Lyft, and all these kind of gig economy companies that offer ride-share services or even deliveries like DoorDash and all those, as far as the classification of their workers. They want to classify them as independent contractors, whereas the government of California and in other states are kind of trying to see what happens to continue. They want to classify them as employees. And the differences between one and the other are obviously critical, because when you're an employee, you have certain benefits and certain pay time off and waiting time and other kinds of employee benefits that normally you don't get as an independent contractor. Now, when you're an independent contractor, you have also other benefits that as an independent contractor you like, because That's the part of the independent. You set your hours, you set your schedule, you set basically your working everything. Basically, you decide how much to work, when to work, in which conditions, in which area. You basically are independent, and you say, yes, I'm gonna work with your company rules because I'm working for your company, but I'm going to decide everything else. So when these companies are struggling for survival, like Lyft and Uber at this point, most of these companies are actually losing money right now. It's critical for them that they continue.
I don't think a lot of people understand. Like, I think a lot of people think these are like big, there was some politician calling out DoorDash a few weeks ago, and it was like they were saying something about they were charging different prices for different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And they were saying this is discrimination, blah, blah, and it's like,
no,
it's like, well, no, it costs more to deliver to certain places. And
Right.
they said DoorDash loses. Like, the politician was saying something along the lines of, like, it was some California congressperson, and they were saying, like, you know, these multi-billion-dollar companies, like, yeah, revenue, but I was like, you know, DoorDash loses money, right?
Right.
Like, they're not making money.
That's another example. We're talking obviously at length about the USPS, but this has been around for a long time. The classification of, and
Yeah,
this is
I
not just a
think-
gig economy thing. I mean, I remember back in the days.
Oh, I think the solution is, because I've seen multiple proposals for this, is a third classification. So we basically have employees and contractors, and that's it. And there's a proposal, and I think it may happen, of a middle ground, which is for the gig economy, basically. And I think what it was they pay Social Security and Medicaid taxes, but they
Who pays?
so the employee, the worker, basically.
Well, they always pay. That's part. That they pay the
Well-
both portions. I mean, you're an independent contractor. You pay the full employer and employee part yourself. So that's not going to
Yes,
change.
But they also,
It's more about the benefits.
it depends if you classify. If you're an individual business, you don't though.
No, you do. You always pay.
No, if you're a business and you're a business of one, you don't pay Social Security taxes.
No.
You only pay it if you give yourself salary. But if you don't give yourself salary,
No. That's not how it works.
yeah. If I start a company tomorrow and I'm the only employee, I
Yes.
don't pay Social Security unless I make myself a W-2 of that company.
No, you do. You pay Social Security taxes on whether you take a distribution or you pay yourself a salary, however you want to discuss it. If you are an independent contractor and
No,
you are
if
a
you
sole
have a
proprietor,
company.
no, it doesn't matter. You're a sole proprietor. You still pay.
Not unless you give yourself a salary.
No, you're talking income taxes. Okay, we're talking Social Security and Medicare. You pay that no matter what.
You don't pay that on distributions.
No. Yes, you pay when you are. Okay, that's a whole different discussion. But I can tell you, you are talking income taxes versus salary. Okay, so
No. I'm talking Social Security taxes.
yes,
I'm not talking about income tax. You always pay income tax.
if you are an independent contractor, if you are an independent,
No. I'm saying if you're a sole proprietor, if you have an LLC of one, okay, you don't pay. If you give yourself a now, if you make yourself a W-2,
you are a sole proprietor. You need to be a corporation with a W-2. If you are a sole proprietor or a partnership, you don't even have a W-2.
that's what I'm saying. So if you just give yourself distributions, you don't pay Social Security tax on
Yes, you do.
distributions.
Yes, you do.
Since when?
Since always. The government doesn't care if you are paying yourself a distribution.
Are
or
you
whatever.
sure?
I'm positive. You need to be a W-2 employee, a salaried employee in a corporation to basically say, this is my salary and I'm going to pay taxes. No, that's how it works, David. That's how it works. But that's a whole different discussion. The discussion here with
Since when do you pay Social Security on a distribution?
you pay Social Security on all the income that you have, whether
No,
if
you don't.
Okay.
If you don't give yourself a W-2 salary, you just give yourself distributions. You don't pay Social Security on distributions.
You're basically yes. When you don't give yourself a W-2,
Okay, we'll move on. I don't know. We'll look it up afterwards. But
Yes.
I don't think you do.
yes, you do, David. I mean, David, I know that for sure. Okay.
Whatever. Anyways, there's a middle ground that basically said
You pay.
that was a third.
There's a cap.
Let's move on. Let's move
no,
on.
there's a cap on Social Security, which I think this year is like 130
I know there's a cap
something
on Social
thousand,
Security.
and there's no cap on Medicare. So the difference between independent contractor and employee is that when you're an employee, you basically have your employer
Yeah, and they take
contribute
it
with
out.
half.
But I'm talking. Okay, let's move on.
But anyways, the difference is not so much on who pays the Social Security and Medicare, which they're going to be paid no matter what, whether you pay as an independent contractor or employer-employee relationship. The difference is in all the other benefits. Look, when you're off, you're off. You don't have sick days, you don't have vacation days, you don't have paid any leaves or anything like that. When you're an employee, you have certain benefits. When you're an independent contractor, you waive those benefits in exchange for being independent. So you have the independence to say, I don't want to work today. That's fine. And you basically log off of your Uber application and you're not available. Or you want to take a lunch break. Or you
Right,
want to
and
do
you
this.
can work for Uber and Lyft and DoorDash
Exactly.
and all of
And
them.
you can work for many other employers and all that stuff. There's no competition or anything else. So that is the issue. And Uber and Lyft have made it very clear.
And you can write off expenses pre-tax, whereas employees cannot do that.
Yes, obviously you write the expenses of your car and all that stuff. Those are other benefits.
Right, but if you're an employee of Uber, they're just going to take taxes out off the top.
They take
basically.
tax, yeah, obviously.
And you get your money, and then you can do your write-offs and whatever, and then you pay taxes.
Right, but from the company side of view, from the company point of view, from the Uber and Lyft point of view, or the DoorDashes and all these people that use these drivers. In fact, that happened also to FedEx with the FedEx ground guys or workers that were also independent contractors. I remember the local super shuttle company that is based here in Scottsdale that has obviously the blue vans all over the nation, all over the country in airport transportation. It was the same thing. They were cataloged or classified as independent contractors, even though they were driving the blue van, given uniforms, given this and that. And basically they were working with the company application or mapping and everything else. So the difference is that Uber, Lyft, and all these companies are saying we can't afford to have all of our workforce or workers be classified as employees because the additional cost for us, it'll be prohibitive for us to basically survive. So what they're doing now is obviously they're going to appeal the California ruling, but they are going to also, they're threatening saying if this ruling stays, we're going to maybe pull out of California altogether because they say we just can't stay here. And then other states may do the same thing. They may say, okay, well, yeah, you need to be also classified.
I don't think they're going to do that.
Well, of course,
California is a huge market for them. There's no way they can just pull out.
Well, if it's a huge market, but it's a huge losing market.
Well, they're just going to have to raise prices if that's the end.
Okay,
at the end
well,
of it.
Yes. And then when they raise prices to cover those expenses, then you start seeing how people just end
of course
up getting
demand will go down, but I'm saying
Right.
they don't have a choice.
Well, they have a choice of pulling out because if you're in a place,
Yeah.
if you're in a place and you're losing money and you're going to lose more money, then you said, okay, well, they've done it before.
Wouldn't you rather just
They've done
raise,
it before internationally, as you
Wouldn't
know.
you rather just raise prices and say, okay, we'll stay in the market, but we're just going to charge more? And then we don't
Well,
lose money?
first of all, when you do that, you may lose some of your workforce to begin with because some of the workers may say, no, I don't want to be an employee. But so the reasons that you said, they said, I'm working for DoorDash, I'm working for Lyft, and I have my two stickers, the Uber and Lyft, and I do
plus
this and
most
that.
people who do that, it's a part-time job. Like they have a main job and they do this on the
Sometimes
side.
some people do that.
Most.
You can have two part-time jobs that are still W-2 employee jobs.
Right. But I
basically.
mean, they do it. The nice thing about Uber or any of these gig jobs is that basically, unlike a normal W-2 job where they say you're here at this time and don't be late and you have to, right? With Uber, I can just say, hey, I have a free 3 hours right now. I can go work, right? You can't go to McDonald's if you work there and say, hey, I had a free 3 hours, so can I just work now? No, that's not how it works.
No,
So
exactly.
that's the nice thing about Uber and all these things.
But again, even if you're a W-2 employee or an employee of a company, you can have a very loose schedule saying, okay, you're working 35 hours, 40 hours a week.
But that's not
or
how
20
it works.
or
They
whatever.
tell you when you're working.
Well, I know. And even you go to a Best Buy or whatever, they'll say, okay, you're going to work 20, 30 hours. You're still an employee, and then we're going to set the schedule, and then what hours work for you? And you say, okay, well, I can work on Mondays from 1 to 3, and then Wednesdays 3 to 5. You stick to those hours, and they set the schedule for you. But basically, just because you're W-2 doesn't mean that you're working 9 to 5. I mean, you can set the schedule, and you can even be a W-2 employee for a temporary worker. You can say, I have a contract with this company to work for them for 3 months.
Right, but I'm saying the convenience is less.
Right.
Those companies, if you work at a McDonald's They tell you your shift. You don't tell McDonald's your shift.
Exactly.
They tell you
and
your
that's
shift.
the key part of being independent contractors. You are independent. You say, or tomorrow you say, hey, I'm not going to work there.
And you can work, like we said, you can do simultaneously Uber and Lyft and
Yes,
DoorDash.
there's no conflict
and
of
whatever
interest
is
or
giving
anything.
you the order at that moment,
Right.
you can basically do
Exactly. So, anyways, Uber and Lyft are now again fighting this thing, and they're actually teaming up with DoorDash and other companies to come up with their own amendment or their own proposition to say this is
that. Right,
how we're
which
gonna work.
was like the new classification of worker.
Right.
And exactly what the details of that will be, I'm not sure. But
So that's
basically-
something that we're gonna look. I'm definitely gonna follow. I've been following these things for a while, and I remember back in the days.
I just think that I don't know. I think that workers should have the choice. If a worker wants, because the truth is, if a worker wants that convenience, then they should have the choice. But if they would rather work a more regular job, then they can do that. But I think by making them employees, you're just screwing over a ton of workers.
Is becoming more and more difficult today to classify workers. Back in the days, it was very
I don't think-
clear cut
I don't
to
think
classify
companies
a
should
worker.
be responsible for people's health care in the first place. Because I think that's a major problem. It traps people in jobs.
Well, that's not even an issue now because I mean, even you're an independent contractor, you're supposed to have your own health insurance by law. That was the
Right,
whole
but-
Obamacare
but-
thing. But
But if you work for a company and the company provides it,
yes,
one of the biggest reasons people don't leave their jobs when you do polls is because of the healthcare benefits. That's almost always, as far as like, I want to leave, but I'm not. What's the number one reason?
Because you
It's
have
almost
always-
always healthcare.
yes, but that's because now, before you could leave and say, okay, I'm not going to have insurance or I'm uncovered. Now you need to have
Right,
your
and
insurance.
it's
That's a
extremely
whole
expensive.
Well, it is expensive, obviously, depending on the situation. But yeah, it is expensive, and the mandate. And if you don't get it, then they have these penalties, which now Trump has been trying to waive, and they waived them and all that stuff. But yeah, now health insurance is mandatory. So, but that's one of the sides. The other thing is obviously other benefits like vacations and pay time off and waiting time or whatever. If you are an Uber driver and you don't have a ride or something, then you're still driving around with your car and expenses, and you're not being paid for that time. You get paid for the ride, and you don't get a cut from that ride. If you are an employee, they say, okay, you have this, however they set it up, you have this base salary no matter what, and then you have this percentage of your rights. They'll have to restructure the thing.
Right, but I think
Either way, the bottom line is that it's going to be much more expensive for these companies to have all
but
these
the
guys.
point is, like, if you're an Uber driver, ultimately it's your choice to be an Uber driver. So if you're not making enough money doing it and you say this isn't worth it, then you can do something else, right? But leave it up to the workers if what they want to do. I would rather have the workers have free choice between all these different
But let me
things.
ask you, don't you think if you're an Uber driver and you are, like I talk to the Uber drivers all the time and they're hustling on this, there's guys that say, oh yeah, I got like 40 trips a day in 3-4 hours or whatever they have time. They're hustling. I mean, they're working all the time. But if you are working with a salary, you may kind of start saying, oh, I don't need to drive so much. I mean, I can go take a lunch break, whatever,
if
and they're
Uber-
paying me.
I think I think the end up solution might be Uber can give drivers an option. So you can be a contractor or an employee. But if you're an employee, then you have to do this certain amount of time giving rides. You cannot work for another service, right? Like, basically, if you become an employee, then just like every other company has very strict rules, they can have very strict rules on you.
But how do you separate the employee? They're both employees with the same rules, and then employee number one ends up making a lot of money for the company with 40 rides in one day or whatever number it is, and then employee number two is waiving a bunch of rights for whatever
then
reason.
they get fired. I mean, it's like any other job. If you suck at your job, you get fired.
Because right now they have this.
If I'm Uber and I say, okay, you're full-time employees now, okay, well then you must be available 8 hours a day.
Available,
for
yeah,
rides.
but how many rides are they making? Because if they're available,
well,
and
that's
being
on
paid,
Uber's discretion. But if
it's more tracking, and they have to keep track of who's normally.
nah, it's not that hard. They track already drivers.
Well, they do, but right now they
They
have
basically
incentives.
say this is it, right? Like, all they have to say is you must be available 8 hours a day, and you must not have a cancellation rate higher than this percentage. And if you have a higher cancellation rate than that, or you're not working the full hours, then we fire you. It's no different than if you work in McDonald's and you have an 8-hour shift and 6 hours in you leave. They're gonna fire you. If you're an employee, then they have much more control over you, right?
And the other thing is the tipping too. The tipping is usually more because you're an independent contractor. When you're an employee, you're on a salary. Then Uber implemented this tip and Lyft that you add tips to your fare, to the driver, and you rate him and all that stuff.
I think that's the answer. And by the way, I think if you give them the option, the far majority will just choose to be independent.
Yeah,
I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
Give them the option. You can be a contractor or you can be an employee. But if you're an employee, well, now you work for us. So we can have very strict rules on you, just like every other company can. So you must be available at these hours. You must give these amount of rides, all that stuff. And if you don't meet that criteria, we'll fire you, just like any other job would fire you.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll see how that wraps up. It's being an ongoing fight, and that's the thing. These companies they barely have any profits, and they're spending so much money in litigation, again, in lawyers, and fighting this and fighting that. And it's like, man, I mean, they need to have some clear rules so they can just save that money that they're spending to paying lawyers and just kind of, come.
Well, not to mention these days with the pandemic, Uber Eats now is much bigger business for Uber than the rides right now, because people aren't getting Uber rides, but everybody's doing Uber Eats.
Yeah.
The money maker right now for them is Uber Eats, actually, not Uber rides.
I tell you, for most of the drivers that I've talked to, they're very happy with their independent contractor status.
Yeah,
and I talked to drivers in every major city, including international, and they say, no, I do this part-time. I don't have a job, or I do this just because I don't like to be home all the time, or blah, blah, blah. Whatever reason, they're very professional as far as how they act, but they are independent.
I think it's very simple. Just give workers the choice. I think that's the answer. Just give them the choice. So if you don't want to be like, there's plenty. What they don't talk about is there's tons of drivers who, if you force them to be employees, they're not going to do it anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's just the independent part that is, and I think the IRS is going to have to, because all this is revenue that they're seeking. The IRS is looking for additional revenue, and they have these rules of how to classify one person as employee, independent contractor, or whatever. But in today's economy, the gig economy worker is almost outnumbering the full-time worker, and
not yet.
It's becoming to a place where it's a major workforce, and especially now that you are having people work from home, work remotely. There's no, like, one of the rules for contractors as employees is that they make you work in a particular office and they provide you with the workspace and blah blah blah. Okay, that's not happening anymore.
I was like, if I'm a full-time employee of some tech company, I was like, what's stopping me from getting 2 jobs? If I'm working from home, my boss would have no idea.
Right.
What's stopping me from working at startup A and startup B?
Yeah.
And
obviously,
getting double salary.
Your contract, your agreement with the company will have a non-compete clause of some sort saying that you're not.
I was reading an article, and this is something I thought about a long time ago, and someone actually did it, where what this guy did was he had a job at one of these major tech companies. I forget which one. And he literally, he had a nice, comfy $200,000 salary, and he would subcontract most of the work that it was like actual work needing to be done to like people in India, and they would do all the coding for him. Yeah. And then he would work, and obviously he's on the calls and meetings and all that. Now, the problem is he got fired because that's against the confidentiality agreement and all that. But like, I thought about that. I was like, if you make $200,000 a year, you can probably find some hungry person in some other country to do the job for you for 40, and you literally do nothing and you just make profit.
Yes, I know. You can cheat the system, but at the end of the day, you are working for a company. You're working for a company. If you start doing all the stuff, then the company has all the right to just fire you because you have no compete confidentialities and even things like that. So, but yeah, the thing is, like, when everybody's working from home, you're in an office, they don't even let you go, most of the corporations, to go to Facebook or this or that, or all your social media stuff. You're at home, you can have your personal computer and your work computer, and your personal computer, you're half a day checking your Facebook posts.
No, but I definitely think maybe not working for other companies because of non-competes and all that, but you could definitely start your own side business. I think there will be a lot more people,
a lot of people
working on
how many
side
people,
businesses.
How many people do we get in our business that are starting a side business in e-commerce, Amazon, or whatever? These are people that even when they send you email address and stuff, they use their Gmails or something, but they're working for a company, and they're telling you they're trying to start this side gig and all that stuff, and then the side gig takes off and it does well. Then they say, okay, company, thank you very much. I'm going to do my own thing. So that's part of the entrepreneurials, which is fine, but that's happening all the time. So
no, I just think it'll happen much more so. Because if you're in an office, you can't be working on your side gig, or if you do, you have to be hiding it or
and
whatever.
research and all that.
But if you're at home,
right, which is the whole thing why a lot of companies didn't want people to work from home because they didn't trust.
If you're at home and you're gonna have like an hour of downtime, you can just work on your side business in the meantime.
Right. All right. So one final topic. I said we're gonna leave this for an hour, and we are just over about 10 minutes over. So speaking of traveling, and this is something that I found actually very useful. I just wanted to share it. These days it's so hard to find specific information about when you travel, what are the conditions or the conditions of traveling to certain states in the U.S. or even countries outside of the U.S. There's rules that are changing on a daily basis pretty much as far as whether you're going to be forced to go through quarantine if you go to European countries, and within European countries, which countries are more strict than others, or you come back from a travel overseas or to whatever country, what happens when you come back? Do you have to go through certain U.S. airports, or do you have to be quarantined in your own place because you came from France, Spain, Italy, or any other country? So Google has this Google Travel, which is almost like the unofficial online travel agency for Google, has this additional information that is very useful, and I've been looking for this type of information in many areas, just basically Googling where can I travel as an American citizen to and what are the conditions, So there's countries that say, okay, yeah, fine, American citizens can travel, just bring a health certificate of some sort or nothing. And other countries say, no, you can't come in unless it's unusual circumstances or something, or a skilled worker or something, or you can travel, but you have to be 2 weeks in quarantine in a hotel or in a location that you determine or something. So anyways, Google has, when you go to Google Travel and you just say where you want to travel, you have a lot of information for each consulate, for each embassy, for each state within the US. That is the key part, is that is actually frequently updated. So I've been going to websites where it says, even like going to Texas, and I need to go to, local Texas news portals and services and newspapers and things like that online to find out what are the latest conditions from the governor to say, okay, can a person from Arizona travel to Texas? Or am I going to be in quarantine, or can I come back, or things like that? So within the U.S. it's a little more clear. But if you're traveling internationally or planning on traveling internationally time in the near future, and you book your airline trip and everything, and the airline says, hey, travel conditions may change, click here, whatever, they don't care. They just leave it up to you to do the research. They're going to sell you the flight. They're going to book the flight for you to go anywhere, because they leave it up to you to find out whether once you get there, the airport authority says you need to be 2 weeks in quarantine, or you need to bring a health certificate of some sort, or a negative test within the last 24 hours for COVID-19 and things like that. So I think what Google has done is actually a good service, and you simply go to Google Travel. There is an app for the phone, and obviously you can go online as well with a desktop computer. You can find a lot of information once you do a little research. And again, the key part is that it's always updated with the latest. So it's like
this
a one
episode
source.
was brought to you by Google. Google will expect our check in the mail for that.
No, Google is not a sponsor. It's fact. We've been actually trashing Google in previous episodes with the monopolies and all that stuff. But in this case, I think they are actually doing a good thing. So anyways, that's it for today, unless you have any other topics to discuss.
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll be here again next week, which is, what's next week? Today's the 13th, right? So it'll be the 20th of August. Yeah. There's a lot of things that I wanted to discuss today too, but there's still a little, there's topics that are not really quite clear, so I don't want to kind of just announce them just yet. But there's a lot of things going on in the e-commerce world, and as we get closer to the fall season, as summer wraps up, there's a lot of question marks as far as holiday season, e-commerce, schools, everything else. So, but we'll have more information probably next 1 or 2 weeks. But until then, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.